SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket is currently grounded. This rocket, which is the workhorse of the global space industry, cannot fly. Here's what happened on a recent Falcon 9 flight, why the FAA has grounded the rocket, and when SpaceX might be flying the Falcon 9 again. On July 11, 2024, SpaceX was conducting a routine launch of its Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. This mission was yet another flight to deploy 20 Starlink satellites for the company's satellite internet constellation. The bulk of Falcon 9 flights are for Starlink satellites, so these have become pretty routine. The launch went well, stage separation was nominal, and the first stage returned to Earth and landed on a drone ship in the Pacific Ocean. The second stage continued into space with its Merlin vacuum engine. But during its ascent, viewers on the broadcast noticed something: ice building up on the rocket and falling off in chunks. This wasn't normal, and many speculated that there may be a liquid oxygen leak. Liquid oxygen is a propellant for the rocket, along with rocket-grade kerosene. The live stream cut off before SpaceX confirmed that the second engine burn for the upper stage had ignited properly. There was no confirmation of a second burn and no celebration that the satellites had been properly deployed. Well, SpaceX announced later that the rocket was not able to complete its second burn, which was supposed to start about 52 minutes after liftoff, and that the Starlink satellites were deployed in a lower orbit than intended. On their website, SpaceX confirmed that the culprit here was indeed a liquid oxygen propellant leak on the second stage. They outlined the steps they took to save the Starlink satellites and confirmed that they wouldn't be able to save them, but there's no danger here, they'll just burn up in the atmosphere. But the Starlink satellites aren't the concern here, it's the rocket. The Falcon 9, as I mentioned, is the workhorse of the space industry. If you look at the statistics for 2024, according to Jonathan McDowell's yearly space activity report, there were 223 orbital launch attempts in 2024. 109 of them were from the US, and 91 of those were the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Sure, most of the Falcon 9 flights are internal for Starlink, but a lot of commercial, governmental, and military space relies on the Falcon 9. Too much, frankly, relies on the Falcon 9. If nothing else, this experience demonstrates why NASA is committed to having multiple launch providers and spacecraft. Too much dependence on any single provider can bring things to a screeching halt if there's an anomaly during a mission, as we're experiencing right now. So, what happens now? Well, if you've watched my Starship videos at all, you know by now that for any launch that doesn't go according to mission plans, the FAA immediately and routinely opens a mishap investigation into the flight. According to the FAA, there are 9 events listed here that will lead to the opening of a mishap investigation for any commercial launch. As you can see, it's pretty broad. We're focusing in here on the last one, failure to complete a launch or re-entry as planned. This honestly, in and of itself, wasn't a huge incident. The loss of some Starlink satellites isn't a big deal, they can just make some new ones, and they will. But the larger issue is, what is the problem with the rocket, and how can we be sure that this problem will not happen again? Say, if there are humans on the flight. The goal of a mishap investigation is to identify what went wrong and then highlight corrective actions that need to be taken. Until the FAA has a satisfactory answer to these questions and the corrective actions have been implemented by SpaceX, the organization will not issue a launch license for the Falcon 9. That effectively means that the Falcon 9 is grounded. Now, there is some flexibility here in terms of the mishap investigation. The FAA can conduct its own investigation, or SpaceX can do it themselves and submit the results to the FAA. If the FAA is in charge, they can coordinate with the NTSB, NASA, and the Space Force as needed. Mishap investigations can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months or even longer to conclude based on how complicated the problem is. An oxygen leak is not an overly complicated problem as long as SpaceX understands why the leak occurred. Now the question is, when will the rocket fly again? No one wants to compromise safety. I want to emphasize that. But these mishap investigations can take weeks or even months to close, so SpaceX is now arguing that they should be able to fly before the FAA has closed their mishap investigation. This is according to Will Robinson-Smith at Spaceflight Now. The FAA told him that SpaceX submitted a request on July 15th to return to flight as soon as possible. The organization confirmed that it is reviewing the request. SpaceX did something similar with Starship's fourth test flight, and they succeeded. With that flight, SpaceX argued that both stages did re-enter within their specified zones for IFT-3, and that there was no danger to public safety, so the FAA didn't actually need to close their investigation into Flight 3 to issue the license for Flight 4. And that's what happened. They got the license. But this is a little more complicated. Starship is an uncrewed flight test. Falcon 9 is an operational rocket that does launch humans. There are two launches in particular that I'm thinking about here. Polaris Dawn, a private crewed mission, which will be the first EVA, or spacewalk, from a commercial spacecraft, is scheduled for liftoff no earlier than July 31st. And NASA's Crew 9 mission is currently targeted for mid-August. Both of these flights are on board of Falcon 9, both are crewed, and both have the potential to be seriously delayed. As an aside, this is exactly why NASA wanted two providers for commercial crew, which are the flights that take astronauts to and from the ISS. I've gotten so many questions and kind of mean comments about this during my coverage of the Boeing Starliner crewed flight test, which yes, it is a mess. Yes, the astronauts are still at the ISS with no return date as of the filming of this video. For more on that, check out my overview. But right now, because the Falcon 9 is grounded, there is no ability to launch new astronauts to the ISS for the US. Starliner is not operational yet, which means that if NASA needed to launch a relief crew in a hurry to the ISS for some reason, or launch a rescue mission for Butch and Sunny, which to be clear is not a thing that is being considered at the moment, NASA would have to turn to Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. Now, it's likely if this problem had happened when there were astronauts on board the Falcon 9, it would have been okay. The mission would have failed, of course, but the second stage did survive. It didn't explode, it didn't break up, it just didn't complete its second engine burn. The Crew Dragon has powerful engines that could raise its orbit if necessary, and then they could figure out how to re-enter safely from there. So the question is now, when will the Falcon 9 fly again? The FAA could accept SpaceX's reasoning and allow them to fly again as soon as this week. On one hand, that would be understandable. Even with this failure, Falcon 9's track record is phenomenal. The first Falcon 9 Block 5 rocket, which is the current configuration of the launch vehicle, launched in May 2018. There have been 298 Falcon 9 launches since then. 297 of those have been successful. This is a 99.66% success rate. By any metric, that is phenomenal for a rocket. Even with this failure, this is incredibly reliable. The Falcon 9 is just an incredibly reliable rocket. That being said, it is important that the FAA actually regulate the companies it's supposed to. There is no need to ground the Falcon 9 if the FAA doesn't see a good reason to, if it's just bureaucratic red tape that is delaying the close of the mishap report. If the issue is simple and the fix is easy, then let SpaceX fly. But if there is any shadow of a doubt there, the investigation piece by the FAA is very, very important. And then there's the matter of SpaceX's customers here. SpaceX is fortunate in that it has its own payloads, Starlink satellites, so it can demonstrate a successful return to flight before it flies astronauts or any commercial satellites for a third-party company. Restoring that trust is very important. We'll see what happens here. It's not clear when the Falcon 9 will fly again, but until that rocket does, there will be serious ramifications across the launch industry. But for now, that is about all I have to tell you about the SpaceX Falcon 9 mission anomaly. Thank you for watching. I am Swapna Krishna, and this is Ad Astra.